Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're joining you once more with some chess action here at the EGFH. Getting straight on in game number one. So, this is our lower bracket finals. We've run through the gauntlet. We've made all of our appearances, and it's back to where we started, right? This first match where we saw in the day number one, where it was a 2 seed versus 3 seed. Now coming back, Sheehan versus Palm Beach, and see who is able to take this winning game number one. Obviously still best of 3 setting, not going up to any best of 5s throughout this bracket. As we do look towards the current state of everything, so far it has been a pretty fast-paced game, right? Both players using around a minute of their time so far, and collectively not really finding too much success on either side. Obviously, you look towards the current pawn that is hanging for black on the c6 square. Could maybe get capitalized upon, threaten the rook, or not rook, queen. Beyond that, though, on the black side of things, you're really going to have a difficult time being able to protect that. I think one of the options that does really come to mind is going to be rook to c8. As we kind of highlight that, it does get your rook more involved in the play, as well as that it also does stop for that take. I don't love this one, though, as now you do have to get your knight involved to be able to defend your rook, and then if white takes on this knight, then we'll see the pawn now getting exposed, which leaves this queen to just start attacking through the center. So overall, I don't love the idea, but I do think that it was reasonable. We'll see whether or not white's going to be able to spot that, as well as black, who I think if you're playing black, you do just have to cut your losses and take. Instead, though, they're going to move the rook. Make sure they don't drop too early. So now white has a few options in this game. I think the most reasonable one is going to be just to take the bishop. You attack down on e6. And the only real counter is to just take with the rook down onto g7, but instead white is going to elect to create more pressure onto this rook, who still doesn't have a whole ton of area to play with. You'd imagine that the next move is going to be a rook to g8, maybe f7 if they're feeling a little bit aggressive. Overall, though, not a whole lot of, I guess, change up. Black definitely in a rough spot, and that is not the ideal by any mean. I'm now realizing that these sides are also swapped, which definitely is unfortunate to say the least. So we're going to get that handled real quick and easy. As obviously, these two teams, they're looking good for sure, but what will the response look like at G-Lanterns? Spending a significant portion of their time on this next move, which is interesting to say the least. I mean, it is definitely a losing battle you're playing towards, which is why it's definitely not the greatest idea to spend a lackluster time towards the start of the game, because then you get put into these situations where your pawn structure looks weak, as well as there's so much pressure getting built up against you with pieces getting inputted deep into your own territory. And so yeah, I mean, this move, there's nothing really that does come to mind on what the ideal is going to look like. Definitely, though, the rook should get moved. Instead, though, they're going to back up the bishop, trading very swiftly, a lot of moves coming in rapid succession. And I mean, it's not the end of the world. You lose the bishop, trade it for a rook, but now with the castling confirmed, Toasty's definitely going to be in a ideal spot when it comes to marching down on the e-file. You can line up maybe even both your rooks with the queen. Beyond that, though, what we certainly are going to be looking at is maybe even just like capitalizing on that e7 pawn, right? You have so many pieces working towards getting there. And it does seem like black is going to kind of understand this. So Geolanterns is going to look to maybe put the rook down on e8. That way you can create a little bit more presence. Push the pawn up to e6. That way the bishop as well gets involved. There's a few options that you can make happen, and still the king. So this is definitely not a file that will be easily taken for white. As of now, though, with the +5 advantage, it's not going to be an easy game to win out on by any means as black. It's now a move that does just kind of put the ball in black's court, right? The b3 doesn't really do a whole ton. To an extent, it supports, I guess, ec4 if you want to move your knight and play that, but overall, nothing that will shift the tide of this game at all. We'll be seeing the response, and off of b3, making this knight a little bit of a weaker square without the b2 pawn supporting it. Black will look to capitalize with a queen to d4, threatening the knight, threatening the rook. There is still the rook on e1 that does protect it, but that doesn't really do a whole ton in terms of, like this knight. So it's likely going to be a move to a4 instead. We will be seeing Toasty going for a d2 switch, not having the rooks lined up with the queen. But this does actually do a lot. It does give the opportunity for h6, threaten the king, force out f7. And at that point, it doesn't obviously, make a whole ton of immediate damage, but it is going to start to really threaten a lot of ideas from coming out, as well as that it cuts off the bishop's line, where, when you have your king in front of the bishop, it is going to make it so that all of these squares no longer can be, I guess, present. Giving the king a little bit of room to work with, opening up e8 as an option, as well as just taking both of these big monumentous pieces onto the same line. Obviously, d3, not a square that will be easily taken with c2 still around, but what will Toasty go for? There's so many real kind of opportunities. You can maybe even go for a g5 play and start threatening up onto e7 instead. They are going to back up the knight, play that over to e2, blocks off the rook's current avenues, but it does at least threaten the queen. As well as that, it gives you a chance to start building up, and black is going to hang the queen. So this is going to be a bit of a mistake found out, capitalized upon. And so at this point, white going to be very, very happy. There's the resignation, and that is going to be game number 1. So if you are on the side of this, this Palm Beach squad, it is not ideal by any means. Over on Sheehan, they're going to be definitely a little bit more on that, I guess, mental up. So we'll see what this Sheehan Titans rosters are going to be capable of in game number 2, as we're going to get underway very shortly. But that was definitely not the ideal situation by any means. From the start, it was looking very close, but it did not, maintain that same level of play. And so what that does end up kind of meaning is that we're likely going to be seeing a bit of a one-sided affair, because there's still a lot of players, a lot of depth to the Sheehan roster. So we'll see what that is going to look like after this short break. We'll see you all very, very shortly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're joining you once more for our next game of the evening. See what this does end up looking like. As this match, hopefully a little bit on the closer end, beat the clock once more, going up against Poor Bob. We saw this match earlier on, actually, as Poor Bob having a good performance for sure. Beat the clock, contesting them for a decent portion of time. Unfortunately, not able to get the win. We do see C5 connecting onto D4, making a bit of a threat. If you take with a knight, we'll likely be seeing C5 getting ensued by the Poor Bob. Instead, they take with a queen, which might even be a little bit on the more detrimental side. A lot of avenues cut off. What we're likely seeing up bishop to D7, continuously adding on more pressure. That's a free queen. Will Poor Bob be able to see that? I mean, you'd imagine with their current rating, they'll be able to understand C4 does get this game done and dusted practically, as there will not be an answer to it. Maybe, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can win this queen at this point. This was a massive overcommitment. They are going to play c4, and that is likely to be game over in general. I mean, losing a queen this early on is very, very detrimental to any type of success that you're going to be able to find. And, oh, never mind. I didn't see that coming. Well, it's still rough. It is still very, very rough. I mean, they don't lose the queen, which is good. But it is still a situation where your opportunities to escape are still very much in the lackluster zone, where we're likely going to be seeing bishop to c5 coming out soon, and then after that, maybe queen to g5, maybe put the queen all the way back into your, I guess, starting squares. Overall, yep, they are going to end up playing queen to e2. This is a risky maneuver just because I'm looking at a bishop to b5 and eventually playing like c3. Then you have this queen and rook lined up for the taking. We are going to be seeing a lot of discipline coming out, though, from the Sheehan squad, as they're going to castle early. And theoretically, this e5 pawn could be the next thing to be threatened, as you still have two attackers. There's two defenders on it, but if you play rook e8, that's when you're going to be able to add on enough to kind of create that cataclysm. Over on the other side of the board, though, there's still the option to play rook e1 just to keep on fighting for it. So as c3 does get played, we will be seeing rook e8 coming on out. Likely to be responded with rook e1. And then after that, what is like, oh, never mind. They're going to concede any real chances of being able to keep this pawn alive. Yep, they're just going to take that early. Now, that's interesting, taking with the f pawn. And so overall, you are going to lose a little bit of tempo, a little bit of pieces as well if you're white in this scenario, but it isn't the end of the world just yet. I mean, it is definitely looking rough when you're playing against a player this caliber and you're down a knight. It does make it exponentially more difficult to be able to get back into this game. Now, as the rook does return to take, we'll be seeing the bishop. I don't love that. I think that's a lot more... It opens up a lot more options for the bishop, but I think I would have liked to see a c6 being the move from the bishop rather than e6 exclusively, because now it is going to be more difficult to put your a rook on to e8. And I mean, it's not the end of the world, though. Now just trying to attack the 2 file. This is just very standard chess, making sure that you won't have any chances of getting back right mated. We'll be seeing g6 coming out as well. It does open up for something like rook f6, but I don't think that is going to give you too many opportunities later on. Rook e4 to be the next to follow up with. And now, as we are going to just get this king starting to get involved into the play, pawns moving forward. Bishop could possibly take onto h3 just to limit the amount of pawns in possibility, but instead going for rook d8, electing to attack the center more. And now just looking to break it open, get your next rook involved. We will be seeing d4 traded out. Both rooks now inside of this central area. And on a 4 file, it does make this a little bit more into the rough position. The move that definitely does shine the brightest in my mind is going to be rook d2, just because of the fact it does force your opponent down onto that final rank right against the board. But obviously, you could just take on to b3. You could play like bishop at g4. There's still a multitude of options available to you. Now, what does this answer look like, right? I mean, in a theoretical sense, you'd imagine black will just have this game done and dusted, but there is always that chance a mistake does occur. 6.5 minutes, time, not, I guess, it's not infinite for sure. You're not at like that 8 minutes mark still, but it is definitely a significant portion of your clock remaining. Move f5 will get played from the bishop, and now canceling any chances of playing rook d2 with b2 in store. Shuts down the check. Now possibly looking to fight for this next pawn. Going up to b4. There's I mean, you could possibly just play rook c4 with your e4 rook, just so that you can make him think like, oh yeah, I'll trade, rook for rook. But I think that would be a little bit more favorable. And so now backing off that way, bishop e4 becomes possible. And if we see bishop e4 coming out before either of these two are moved, that's going to be really spelling out disaster for white, trading a bishop for a rook, leaving it in a 1 rook to 2 rook situation. Definitely not ideal. Let's see if white does realize it. I mean, there's very few other pieces that can possibly be moved. Well, I mean, you got to imagine this will be coming out next, and that is going to be the case. So we'll see what white's going to go with. They are able to take a pawn, but overall, that still is rough. Now, white trying to advance the king in towards these pawns, and that maybe the idea is let's get a draw out, right? Force this into a game 3, which I think is... I haven't really asked about what that is going to look like. Probably should have asked, but... yeah, by this point, king g7 does sort of seal the deal, as you're left with only 1 legal move for your king. And so if we see something like rook b4 and then followed up by rook b5, that could just be done and dusted. So I do still want to see rook b4 definitely getting played. And then if you take this pawn, that's still checkmate. And so they do have that available. That is going to do it, though, as we are going to be seeing the Sheehan school taking a 2-0 victory. Phenomenal work, as they're going to be going up 2-0 within this lower bracket final to face off against High Tech once more in that grand finals. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you then, as we're going to take a short little break as the teams do get set up and ready for this finals. Let's see who's going to take it in the end. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are heading right back underway. Grand finals right around the corner, as these two teams are looking to take that championship home. Obviously, you look towards the high side of the bracket. It is High Tech High School with a commanding 2-0 lead up in the upper bracket earlier yesterday. And now as they come into the grand finals, we'll see whether or not they can follow up with a good ending to their season. As already we do see a bit of a Queen's Gambit getting played. A little bit of a interesting affair as it was the Karo Khan, actually. Where you got E4, C6, D4, D5, a standard game. Nothing too, I guess, exciting about that. Threatening the fork onto C7. We'll see whether or not this will end up coming into fruition, more likely than not. There's the response. I kind of would have preferred B6 just because of the, I guess, pressure you do get relieved. But at this point, you can just threaten to take this bishop, which would obviously look good, as this no longer does give you the threat of a fork. And now with this square being covered by the knight on E7, it does still hold pretty strong. That's a very big mistake, but it won't be capitalized upon. Alrighty. Well, Game Buster, after just giving away the knight, will now be in a equalized position. As we do see neither player having too big of a lead, there is still the +1 for Game Buster, which is definitely nice enough. Do not play A2, please. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't play A2. Thank you very much. That would have been very, very disastrous. Still, though, the knight now getting aggressive cuts off this rook's line of sight, but you do still need to get this rook involved. Of course, playing into E1 might make the most sense. There's the bishop response, trying to get a bit of pressure, but obviously F3 into, like, you know, G4 will just give you enough, I guess, just, you know, piece aggression, where this just becomes a little bit of a bad idea. Instead, we'll be seeing them electing to take the bishop down towards E6. The response does come in as some trades ensue down towards the bottom. The knight getting way too aggressive, but it will give them a free pawn. Now, the issue is this into like this into this does get a little bit crazy. So I'm not totally in love with the knight taking that pawn, but obviously taking a free pawn, who really cares? You got a free pawn out of it. Toasty now moving to the side, looking to really get this involved, try and take the C2 square. I think rook to c8 would make the most sense in a position like this, followed up by like rook to d8 on the opposite side. Something like this, yeah, this into this would probably be best. That way you can threaten this knight a little bit more. It's an interesting move. Would have expected something like c3, just because then you have the b2 pawn protecting it, but that won't be in the realm of possibilities, clearly. Well, alright, this still does look good, though, I can't lie. Now, this knight is a little bit weak, for sure. I don't think anyone's going to be able to doubt that. Now, playing a6, just looking to bide your time. It does cancel out knight to b5, if that was ever in the wheelhouse of possibilities, but Game Buster, I mean, despite the state of the game and not having any, like, massive piece advantages, they're definitely in a very winning position. There's a 3 versus 1 pawn on this side of the board, which is definitely going to make it very difficult to do anything. I like the fact that Black does have the bishop comparatively to the knight, as the bishop does tend to play better in these prolonged games. Alrighty, now this does get a little bit desperate, and I think if you're Toasty, you really do have to be considering all of your best opportunities here, because you can't take this. Well, no, you might have to take that, actually. You can't take this one, though, that's for sure. We know that, that's just obvious. And so what will Toasty go for? I mean, the chances of a back rank mate, they are there. they're no longer totally there, but even now, yeah, I was gonna say, like, rook down here, you're protected by the knight. And honestly, I don't love that from black, because now you don't have any rooks, and you're down 2 pawns. So what black really does have to do there is try and prioritize this left side of the board, utilize this bishop to get some pressure down. Because this right side, this is a losing battle. You just have to try and make Game Buster have, a little bit of a lackluster, I guess, feelings towards it. The king now goes back to e8. It feels like you're just kind of giving up tempo at this point, because now we're going to be seeing knight to b6. This is a free pawn. You're just going to be able to march down this entirety here. So I think it would be very silly if you don't take on to a4. Maybe you want to go up, but yeah, this knight just backing up. But as a5 is still a move we're likely going to be seeing soon. This game is very close to being over by the looks of it. Yeah, there's a5. You can go here, which might just be your best shot. Going up doesn't really work to an extent, because you're still cut off from all of these angles. Literally all 3 of this side, you're not able to move on. So what we might even see is white moving like knight here. That way, no, that doesn't work because you can just go back. But overall, this king position is not the best case scenario by any means. I feel like you probably, maybe not. Maybe you can't take that. Because if you take here, it's just going to go down, and you can't get this bishop here in time to stop it from creating that extra queen. So it really is just it's just a bad position in general for black, as the A file is way too strong right now, and you don't have anything to defend it because of those rook trades that came in earlier. That was kind of the nail in the coffin, as, yep, there's going to be a few more coming in, but obviously the main thing we're going to be seeing is, like, you just play knight here or knight here, and this square now completely taken. So if I'm black, like, the only thing that's really going to be possible is, like, going back in, nothing really, because you can't go here, else the knight takes. You can't go here, because where are you going to go after that? You can't obviously go here, else you're going to be taken there. It just looks very rough. So, still toasty, not making any real moves. See what they do end up going for, I guess, but it's just going to try and challenge, and unfortunately, challenging, you're not going to be fast enough. You don't have the tempo to get there, and that's going to lead to game 1 just being over. Unless Game Buster makes some very, very exponentially rough mistakes, there's no real chances. But when you're playing against somebody who is at that 1687 rating, that's definitely a point of, like, we won't be seeing silly mistakes, right? This isn't going to be a player, even with a limited time clock as this, they're not going to be making, like, anything that's going to give you a way into a game after such a state as what we're seeing now. As now the bishop going to be hung as the fork comes out, threatening both the king and bishop. You can't put the bishop here, or else we'll just be seeing it taken as the knight is falling up. There is the first one. It is going to be a little bit difficult to checkmate. They throw away this first one. Yeah, it does look like this pawn might be able to do something, but not really. And so at this point, it is just going to be a situation where they're going to grab that second queen, start marching it down the file. Never mind, they're looking to get it done this way, which is definitely a feasible option. It does take a little bit longer, but no matter where you go next turn, there's still mate in 1, whether it's here, whether it's here, whether it's there. That works as well. And that is going to be game number 1, going the way of the High Tech High School as they take a very good start to this series. We'll see whether or not they will be able to finish off strong. This is still a best of 3. Obviously, there's not a whole ton of advantages to be taking later on, but we're going to go to a short little break as we will be back. Game number 2 right around the corner. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're joining you once more for possibly our final game of the EGFH chess series. My name is Cherry J. Joining us again as we got High Tech High School on match point. And already a bit of a aggressive start coming from White, as Black going to have a difficult time trying to enter into this game as now threats appear onto the queen. I initially do look towards, the E6 does give you a little bit of a chance to start to pull back the reins, right? Because if you try and play something like B to E5, what could definitely come up is something like F6, just to be able to take that bishop for free. If you try and play something like knight down to E2, that's going to start to give you, I mean, it's not the end of the world, but it does start to hurt because you're kind of backing up your pieces early on into the game. But I do like this move. It covers your bishop. It covers your pawn. It looks good. It covers your king, obviously. Black, though, still not a lot of presence being taken. Now, as we do see C5 getting played, you take here, the bishop's going to start coming swinging. You don't come. Black might just be able to gather a little bit of infiltration into your central control. See what White does end up going for. White still needing to cap castle as well. A very important part of this game. But okay, that's a very big commitment coming in from White to play D5, going straight up into enemy territory. And honestly, I don't hate it. It puts a lot of pressure onto the queen. I'm a little bit curious what the follow-up will look like. It is going to be queen to E4. Not a lot to deal with this. The main thing that definitely does show up in my mind is going to be playing knight to G5, just because of the fact that that does really start to control which squares are going to be safe. Obviously, you still have this line across the board, but beyond that, there's not a whole lot else. Instead, Black just not going to deal with it. They're going to stick around and stay inputted pretty deep. Wow. All right. So they're playing Rook D8. Still looking to put some pressure down onto that pawn, as Queen D1 is still a available thing to take, possibly. Overall, though, White, I mean, we have seen Poor Bob very, very proficient. They've been one of the main reasons that we've seen the school doing so well, making it up to the grand finals. I mean, they've been extremely, extremely proficient. So the next options maybe like, I still want to see that knight move, possibly. But even that might not be the best case scenario, so you lose that pawn on D5. So what about like pawn to C4? start holding it strong, right? Create a little bit of a barricade around your queen. Overall, not the end of the world by any means. Instead, though, they're going to concede that pawn, allow black to pick that up for free, actually taking out any defenders of it, with now the queen being blocked off from the sightlines. Instead, though, electing to take on to g2, threatening the rook as the rook now comes back over to g1. There will no longer be any castling options for white, which could really create a big disappointment in this game. Let's see what this next turn does end up looking like, though. Is poor Bob already utilizing so much time. They're going to play c4. So this was a move that I had considered earlier, and I'm not totally unimpressed with it. I think that this could work, but I would have liked to see it a little bit on the earlier side of things. Interestingly enough, they're going to back off to a certain extent. I kind of was expecting queen to d3 to be pulled out, just to continue laying on the pressure onto these white pieces, especially now that the castling has become a thing of the past for white. And especially a move like queen e6 does cut off the bishop as well from being able to start to get involved. So at least for the time being, I mean, it's not a bad move, as it does still pin the knight to the king, but overall, it's just not what I would have appreciated, considering how big of an advantage black does have at the current state of the game. And now playing a bit defensively. Obviously, the bishop now taking away the pin from the king and the knight, but I don't know how much that's going to do in consideration of this knight's going to come down, maybe right here, start to get something done and dusted, maybe play like the rook to get involved as well at a certain point. There's a multitude of options you have if you are on this high-tech high school squad, and I think overall knight to d4 is going to be a real big threat to deal with. Because you can't take back with the knight. You take back with the knight after this, then it's going to be a pawn attacking this. And all right, well, no longer having the pawn there, as the bishop's going to take. I don't know how I didn't see that one, but yeah, it's a good move for sure. For sure. Because now, no longer having the pawn, this move becomes a thing of the past. They're still going to look to play for it, though, as they threaten this bishop. If you take back, that way the knight does get involved, or the rook can also get involved in the play. Overall, though, I don't know. I'm a little bit curious on exactly, how this is going to look for poor Bob in terms of the time, especially. As you can look towards the bottom of your screen, we highlight the 5 minutes and 30 seconds that you do have as poor Bob. Not an ideal position by any means. On the other side of things, that was 7 minutes and 11 seconds. Definitely enough to really kind of consider all of your options and just kind of slow down the pace of the game for the time being, as now the trades do transpire. Still, though, look at this pin over on e2. You got the queen, you got the knight, the rook's starting to get involved. You play rook c or e3, it does start to kind of look to be a good position. But now playing knight to f5, it does take out e3 from being a real possibility, as well as threatening rook g3. I want to see this bishop get involved somehow, some way. Maybe, I don't even know, push this one out and get it to a6. That could possibly work out for you. As of now, though, not a whole lot to be dealt with. Rook to f3. This could lead into knight back to e2. That way you threaten this rook. Or they can just play rook e3, and that does become a very disastrous move. As we are going to be seeing, this is an interesting one because you can also get the check off, force them on to f1 if not considered. But I think more realistically than not, what we are going to be leading into is going to be rook g3. Yep, that is going to be the case. Now this knight still on the side of the board, still having some impact on how this is going to play out, but it isn't going to be nearly as much as if, say, any other rook move may have happened. So they are going to start to maybe even get... This does seem to be the play, as this also does get this rook involved. I think this is a very good move overall to start to push your bishop down into the other extremities of the board rather than holding it on its originally designated square. Let's see, though. As... Poor Bob, definitely not the ideal position to be in by any means. They're only down 1 point of material, though. If you can continue to hold strong for the time being, and we see mistakes starting to get drawn out, there's definitely a reality in which this is still going to be a winnable position for white, despite this definitely looking rough for the time being. But again, the time, such a big issue for poor Bob. This is possibly one of the most, I guess, extraneous time usages we've seen all weekend long, as already we're only 22 moves into this game, and poor Bob 23 has dropped 7 or 6 minutes and 30 seconds or about that. It's obvious on paper, not a whole ton. That's a good move, though. Playing knight, or not knight, queen to d6, what this does is start to threaten onto d2. There's not really a whole lot to stop this, excluding maybe, like, I don't even know, but overall it is going to be very rough to get around this as white. This, king e1, yep, that's the only real possibility, I'm pretty sure, as it's the only thing that's going to help you stay alive, stay secure. That's an odd one. Okay. They play bishop to b7. I think I would have preferred bishop to a6 just because it threatens this pawn for the time being. But as of now, they're playing f3. Not entirely sure behind the reasoning on that one. There's a threat to incoming, possibly, as you got this onto the rook. They're going to have to move this probably down to g2 if I had to take a guess, and then move this knight. That way you do have another supporter onto the d2 piece, but there's still this fork. There's still this fork, and they're going to play it. As of now, you basically are forced to either go here, here, or here. Likely it's going to be c1. You play c1, though. There's the check. There's the take. You're down a rook and a knight at that point. It is going to be excessively more difficult to win this game as of now because of this rook g2 piece move. And it does seem as if they realize it just as much as the rest of us, as they're going to be sacking this rook, looking for any type of workaround into this game. It isn't going to be there, though, at least for the time being. Queen to c1 makes a lot of sense. You don't want to get taken down this easily, this early. But I'm still looking at bishop to take on to f3. Queen takes on to h2 will be the end-all, be-all. You don't have a checkmate in store due to knight f1 being a possible option, and that is going to be what they'll end up playing, but there is still this in the realm of possibilities just to take this down early on, as well as bishop to come through. If you don't love this queen, you could honestly even just send this one down, trade a rook and a knight for the queen. But that might just be a little bit of a blunder. I'm not totally sure on what that would be looking like in terms of the computer's appreciation, but instead electing to move back queen to h4, a bit of an unconventional option, but it does still threaten so much. You cannot get out of this line because of the rook on d8. You have to block with the knights. Now the knights, yes, this is the necessary knight, because if you don't take with that one, it's going to be here, and then you're losing even more. But that's going to be strong for sure, as they take so much presence. Bishop still can come through. Rook can come through. There's so many workarounds into this game. They're going to play the rook to start us off. So now the bishop commencing. Both of these knights threatened. Rook attempting to try and come through, make something happen, but there is still going to be the c4 square that is very vulnerable. After queen c4, we're likely looking at something like this. Instead, though, it is just going to be the bishop to take. Let's see. I mean, a 13-point advantage. It certainly seems like this series is going to be done and dusted. As when you really do start to consider the options, high-tech high school with such a monumentous lead, they're going to throw away the queen, but that doesn't really matter too much as they'll be able to easily make a second one. And so as we do start to see these pieces really coming down, really coming forward, the king now on the opposite side just looking to scurry and to get anything done. Is now making that second queen, looking to come in. We might see queen b6 being the next play just to accelerate the checkmate process. As now take on to c6, put the rook down onto b8, and then end the game with queen to a6. That would end up being the end-all be-all to get a checkmate early on. Instead, they're going to elect for rook d3, and that is going to make this a little bit of an expended, it takes a little bit longer to get this checkmate, but they are going to be able to do it in the end more likely than not, as they're going to give up this pawn. Never mind, the pawn does not get taken, but there is still going to be queen b6, going to have to move that down, and that is going to be checkmate after rook d8. Ladies and gentlemen, your 2026 EGFH chess champions, high-tech high school in dominant fashion, will take a 2-0 to send themselves up into a grand finals finish, winning out, not losing a single game even, all championship weekend long, as it was consistent domination through and through. So make sure you tune in for the upcoming NBA 2K finals, as that is going to be right around the corner.